So hello everyone, my name is Yaroslav Odnorogov. Friends and colleagues who work with me a long time call me Yaro. I'm about to talk with you guys, mostly two topics today. The first one we'll do like in two halves. First one will be about entering the industry and some topics around that kind of area, what to expect, probably some best practices and especially in these days of volatility, how to best prepare yourself to that entrance. And the second is the career development. So possibly we'll give you some tips and advices on, what could be done in order to overcome the struggles and difficulties that 100% will be on the way as you're going through your career progression. And then, if any of you have any questions in the end, we'll try to cover that. So, and because we're going to be galloping through all the topics that I've kind of outlined for myself to cover up, we won't have much time to kind of stop largely on either of them. If you will have any sort of questions or, unfamiliar terminology or anything you want to kind of disclose better, then just like put it a note for yourself so we can later talk about it. Cool. But yeah, before we dive into that, I'll quickly introduce myself better. I am the art director in Splash Damage for almost 5 years now, working as an art director in a couple of different studios, was supporting different projects and shipped 2 titles in past in that position, but many more I've done like throughout my 17 years long career, and predominantly most of the time was working in the concept art department. However, if you think about the concept art, it's one of those type of professions that does service different other artistic disciplines on different projects, which means that you would inevitably be involved in many other subcategories of art creation, such as like VFX, characters, environments, weapons, all sorts of things. So in a weird way, I can say that I wore different hats throughout my career and never been solely just a concept artist. I did animation, I did VFX, I did plenty of other things before I got to a AD position. And due to that experience, I feel like I can share with you quite a few tips. But in past, I was working in such companies like Crytek, Ubisoft, Splash Damage, Adam Hawk, PlayFusion, multiple more. Predominantly over games, but did ship some films as well. But some of the games you might be familiar with, of which I was working on, was Assassin's Creed, Far Cry. I was working on Gears of War, Mortal Kombat, probably like plenty more to call less famous ones. So just to kick off, the first kind of topic to cover within the entering the industry subject, I would say it's pretty much like a question of how do we perceive modern art landscape in the industry, and what is the preference for most of the people, which kind of segment of the industry to choose where to go to, because there's many different ways you can take, and the boundaries between let's say games, movies, VFX, different other media is now kind of like washing off, and you can kind of support different sort of your product orientation as a developer and as an artist. So but most of the current day graphics is done within use of 3D largely. So if you are a 3D artist or even the concept artist who nowadays would need to know 3D for sure to enter the industry, one of the best practices for you to, and probably the easiest and quickest way to learn how to create 3D graphics would be familiarize yourself with Unreal Engine. In my personal view, the tie between like Blender and Unreal Engine is one of the strongest, which gives you like upfront very good kind of entry points in many different fields, such as, for example, automotive, TV, teleshows, like any sort of production for these kind of media. You can do definitely games and most certainly movies as well these days in that engine environment. However, there are obviously some implications on that choice, and so those of you who worked with 3D graphics, you guys do understand how far and how how specific the limitations are between like different categories of the media. For example, working in games, most likely you will have still a lot of like baked 3D and whatnot. In the movies, you will have kind of like numerous poly counts, renders like of an insane kind of like frame rate, which are also kind of very cool looking on a big screen, but they don't have as much technical execution boundaries to them. So it's really up to you to figure out what kind of pipeline and process you want to adhere to and develop yourself into which sort of category. So and besides that, also based on the preference of yours, like you also have to think ahead about what kind of projects you would like to work, and also what kind of teams you would want to be embedded in. And talking on the project specifically, I mostly mean the level of stylization, right? Like, because all of you guys play games, you like you watch, kind of Netflix, you do watch movies, and obviously at one point you would ask yourself, is that something I really would want to do? And if the answer is yes, then at this point you have to start thinking about how to get in that exact specific place and what are the best practices for that niche, because you can't like carpet bomb everything and cover all the grounds at the same time. It's very difficult, time consuming, and especially when it comes to building a portfolio. So yeah, to most equip yourself and in the best possible way, you have to choose your niche and kind of like hit right on that spot. Because one of the common things I hear from the students, for example, in University of Arts in London, where I'm having like honor to teach people, it's that in many cases people have not made their mind yet about what exactly they want to do. They have like really big cloud of ideas, and it does help if you can kind of narrow it down, solidify, and pick your best choices. And imagine what kind of games, what kind of products, what kind of companies you would like to work at, because those vary differently, obviously, and very, very big time. There's a massive difference between working in an indie company and working in the massive AAA studio with like thousands and thousands of people, like Ubisoft, for example, right? It's almost like McDonald's. It exists in every country. There's hundreds of people, and the work technique and your daily routine will be significantly different compared to like small indie studio where you have like only few people working, and obviously the workload distribution, the skill level has to be completely different versus the other option. Plus to that, the stylization of the project matters quite a lot. Most likely if you're doing an indie game, your project quite likely to be somewhat stylized. This is just the general statistics in the landscape. Many of the indies choose that path, and for different reasons. But also like that carries a lot of certain type of skill set demands to comply with if you want to do a specific type of graphics. And same as for the realistic projects as well. They do follow much more rigid pipeline with a specific type of tools that they utilize, like such as like photogrammetry, scan data, metahuman assets, which are available from from Quixel Bridge in Unreal Engine library, but and all sorts of marketplaces. But that, despite the fact that you don't have to create assets from scratch, it actually gives a lot of kind of like different other challenges, more technical, more kind of precision, more staying on track with poly count, textile density, and other things like that. But yeah, just to go on from that topic, you also have to understand entering your first job in the industry that most likely if people got you on the interview and you never had any kind of paid job or commercial job before in your career, and it's just the beginning, it kind of makes sense for you to understand that basically they're not looking for any depth of knowledge, especially like in terms of the technical skills or a specific setup that is used by that specific studio, because this is something that you would have to learn every time you're entering a new kind of company. And every time you're even if you're like a veteran of the industry with like 15-20 years of experience, believe me, like going next time to yet another company, you will have to learn their ways from pretty much from scratch. And so no one would expect you to be like technically like ideal and have absolutely full knowledge of everything, but they seek more for your understanding of fundamentals and ability to comprehend the workflow. And also they would probably want to seek for some confirmation that you have good enough communicative skills, because you wouldn't believe how many times, even if you're technically sound, the bad communication can cause a lot of issues in the process, and make the game development or a movie development process quite costly and expensive in the end. So, but we'll come back to this point a bit later. So yeah, in essence, I would say that studios are looking for artists who think technically, rather than are kind of like memorizing everything by heart, because also technology constantly evolves, and if you understand simple principles that are discussed and talk the same language to other devs, and you can, for example, simply break down the how the shaders are done, or understand how the lighting is set up in the engine, or how to work with the given composition, through the art direction documents, then you most likely will end up in a roster of successful candidates. So yeah. Then obviously, as I said before, artistic fundamentals remain timeless. The design, shape, language, color theory, all these things, like, studying values and kind of like being able to storytell even with a very small amount of brush strokes on a canvas, is quite priceless. So you have to master this no matter what. And by the way, that also includes every single discipline. I could apply that rule, technically speaking, to pretty much anyone who does any sort of art for games, despite whether you're working on a character or on the environment, whether you're a 2D artist or a 3D artist or even animator, all still these things apply. So yeah, and as I also said before, technology evolves very fast. So it's hard to think about what we're gonna have in kind of like 10, maybe 15 years, even in a couple of years future. Things might change very, very drastically from now. So, but certain things stay forever, and those are fundamentals. So make sure you're spend enough time mastering those things. So touch briefly upon what else hiring managers really look for, I guess. That's something that is like always valuable, since you guys will have your first interviews going on at some point. So they would look for things like your general ability to understand kind of like the production constraints, because there's a lot of them in everyday production, and they all connected to different reasons. Some of them are just budget considerations, some of them are time considerations, some of them are technical limitations as well. So it's actually quite important for you to show your ability to kind of like to understand where the lines are laying, and you work within those boundaries, and you're trying to be like most Goldilocks zone, most efficient, right in the middle of those things, and to circumvene the dramatic problems, because it's been proven in recent years with the closure of many studios and many projects being shut down because they've gone too expensive over time, as many of those boundaries were not respected. Once again, always for different reasons, and some of them are quite valid, but it's usually undesirable effect. So yeah, and I would say that your ability to problem solve is probably the top priority for every developer, if that makes sense. Like, and actually that stretches far beyond art. I would say that all the engineers and even the production members who will work side by side with you on the project, even if they're not artists, all of these people, you know, like they sharing the same quality of being a problem solver in the first place. So quite often when people ask me, unrelated people, what's your job? What do you do for a living? This is something I tend to say most of the time. I'm saying I'm helping to solve problems with some artistic means. So meaning I'm an artist, but like every day I would do completely different type of jobs. So, but all of it is about like making things easier and help other people to complete the product within those constraints. So, but obviously there's like an elephant in the room. You have to also appreciate the fact that you can't approach to any kind or apply to any position without having a very, very strong portfolio. Obviously, yeah, because it would be difficult for hiring manager to make any sort of judgment upon your skill without seeing that visual information, which it's a trivial thing, but you have to kind of almost like jump in the shoes of the hiring manager and look at your own skill set, which is represented in your portfolio with the naked eye, with as much judgment as you can, and try to think about it as if would you hire yourself. And if not, if the answer is not, then, you know, and being obviously very honest with yourself and give yourself a most honest critique and a feedback, you will actually you will be able to pinpoint a lot of things or, you know, plenty of things for improvement that you can go on with. Like, but also at the same time, you can always double check with your colleagues and present your portfolio and make like fake interviews with, you know, like a rehearsal interviews with other people to see how you're generally doing. And if you have friends in the industry who are already holding any sort of title, they can help you in that, which is quite valuable. And it's always good to kind of like make this process as smooth as possible with this repetition, and, you know, trying to kind of like make someone role play that game like your hiring manager. I'm a attendant of the you know, applicant for the role. So yeah, and obviously also I would say very often people ask like how many pieces is needed for portfolio. You know, the real answer to this question is very simple. A few good ones would be enough. Sometimes there are cases when people been hired with only having one sample in their portfolio. I personally hired once a guy who was amazing, and I only had to see just one his work uploaded to ArtStation, one finished character, and it was enough for me to understand how good he is with the anatomy skills, sculpting, you know, groom, and other things that are comprising the character skill set that was, you know, required for the time for that specific role. But many people tend to kind of dilute and kind of make more. I wouldn't say that necessarily is wrong, but realistically speaking, you're thinking about like making enough pieces that will get you over the line. And obviously with time, as your career progresses, you will get more and more of those things rolling on. So don't try to overkill with numbers. Like it's not gonna, you know, impress as much, but I would rather suggest try to focus on quality first and invest more of your time in making like as best higher rank quality bar as possible before you go wide in numbers. Unless there is probably like a few exclusions to that rule where you might show a bit more diversity in your portfolio if you're like if you're not certain yet about like what kind of, project is would be in your preference. Like, say for example, you like stylized projects, but you also like some of the realistic ones, and you want to keep yourself open for both, then maybe you can do like split 50-50 between those two. But going more than that probably would be less efficient. So keep that in mind and self-balance. And also, I would say that presenting your professionally yourself is a good tone. People must understand that you're not just a random person in the industry, because in the era of inflation, when folks realize that games are making a lot of money, there's been like an expansion phase, if you will, where a lot of people got in the industry without actual desire or kind of like sole commitment to be a game developer specifically. It's a very famous phenomenon when people just tend to go to industries which have a lot of financial incentive at the time, but they are not really like having that call inherently in them since the beginning. And if that's the case, then you're probably not going to last for that long, because it's a very difficult job. It's a fun job, but it's still a job, right? After all, you have to go there and do it every day, all the time. For years now. So those of you who think that it's very charming and pretty all the time, you're probably gonna see it differently as soon as you come in. And I would keep that thought for a closure, but I would say it has relevance now. So I'll mention that being an artist in games is actually quite rare when you're like absolutely happy with everything. It's weirdly enough, but most of the time you would have to feel a lot of frustration about your growth, about your skill upgrades levels, and the time that it takes, and the amount of sweat and blood that you pour in to become a good artist. So, and it's normal. You have to be prepared that most of the time you would feel almost miserable in these kind of endeavors, because it's the part of the path. To become good at something, you have to realize that you're not good at it, and then it allows you to kind of jump up and forward. And these leaps and steps happen gradually over a long span of time. That's just the human nature. So, but we're probably going to touch upon that briefly in a bit. How we're doing in time, 23 minutes. Okay, we have a couple of more minutes. So, yeah, I would say, well, if to do like a bit of a smooth transition to the second topic, I would say that the first job reality is probably going to be for you, in most cases, a junior position or some sort of a support role, or maybe intern. So it's not going to be as glamorous. You probably won't be doing like a main character of the game right away. It happened for me that same way. I actually, when I joined first time in my career, first studio, I had to do a lot of like props cleanup, assets preparation, assisting seniors, whatever you do, like it's just a dirty work, and there's most of the time it's not really even fun. But on the hindsight, you actually learn a lot. And I think that weirdly enough, the most of the skills I personally got in my career, I learned in those first few years in the industry when I got in, and I started like poking my nose in every single aspect in different disciplines, and learning how things are done, and kind of like puzzle piecing together, gluing the big picture of how games are done by the necessity of fixing some other people's work daily for years. And then only after that, I've kind of comprehended how everything looks like on the neighborhood discipline, and it made me like quite a T-shape specialist at the beginning. If you guys are not familiar with the term, it basically means that T-shape is like a T, letter T, you have like a central rod, which is your main domain skill, whether you're a 2D or 3D or whichever specialization do you have. And then at some point, after growing in that kind of domain, you will have like a choice of do left and right in your neighborhood disciplines in order to kind of become more professionally friendly and kind of like supportive of the other sides, besides you, where you sit in the pipeline left or right. So naturally you can drift into, for example, if you're a character artist, you can become like a weapon specialist, because characters usually associated with a gun, right? They carry or some sort of like a weapon, or opposite side, you can go like into creature art or in the environment, because those are also can coexist, even though they share less of a technical setup for modeling and kind of like working in the engine type of thing. Yeah, with this, I'm probably going to go like in a career development, since I started talking on this, and it's the second part of the talk. After you get your first job in and you do all this, like whatever they give you, you will gradually understand and learn all the things and how to even sometimes talk to people correctly, because what is interesting about this is that the language and communication skills is, as I said before, a massive part of it sometimes is broken between seasoned professionals. And it's due to the fact that people tend to use the same words for different disciplines, meaning different things. For example, assembly or composition for the 2D artist can mean like a fundamental knowledge of how to craft the beauty shot in the frame for a certain scene. But then, for the tech art, that type of composition might mean same word, but mean completely different thing. And when they say it to you, they actually mean to compose objects in the mutable to create like a character or something, which is purely technical thing. And then same with other things, right? Like sometimes people call a word tone, and for an artist, tone is mean difference between bright and dark, right, in a grayscale. But some production member might say a tone, applying it to the game, where they mean like a cheeky, funny, or serious, or whichever other tone. So you have to will then understand which type of language and words and other things apply to which sort of professionals around you. So which is quite important. And still till these days, I keep finding we call it broken phone, basically, when someone says something but then people misinterpret the meaning of that. So be sure you're kind of like explaining properly yourself and listening to what people actually want to deliver to you as a thought rather than their wording. But yeah, in the career development section, I would suggest anyone who thinks that you're choosing this as a profession and going into industry for probably like a really long time, if not forever, you have to think about mapping of your career path. Essentially, you have to understand what are the routes, like in a weird way, if you think about it, it's like an RPG game where you need to kind of pump up your character with some stats and skills, but you always see the path line where you have like, okay, from this I'm going to this, from A to B, from B to C, and on and on. And what are those positions, and what are the forks of your possible development paths? What is the delta between them? Because there's a lot of consideration in that. Usually at a certain initial kind of like time frame, which is somewhere between 1 to 5 years, your career will evolve linearly. Like you will go from the junior to mid to senior, but then after the senior, there's like, quite likely you will have to choose whichever path you want to take. If you're a bit more like a people manager, then you probably want to go to a lead position, which has to do a little bit of admin work besides mastering your own discipline. And then if you're more of a maker and you're kind of wishing to be on your own and you want to really kind of excel in just like crafting art itself, you're more prone to be a principal. And then from there, you can become like, for example, an art director, or even move laterally to a different branch of art, or even to a different branch of production. Because I've known cases when people have been doing art for a very long time, And after a certain year in their career, they've realized like all the nitty-gritty, all the details of it, but they are not like having that much fun of producing assets anymore by themselves. And they find it much more pleasing for them to kind of help other people to do that same job, but more effectively. And that usually happens when you're working in a big studio, for example, and you can go anywhere between the position of a principal who does the job by himself and proud of his work, which is very noble, and obviously you're at this point you're like a really good artist. But then you also can be like non-less additive to the team and game dev efforts by becoming something, for example, like outsourcing manager. You will still have to be an artist at this point, because you need to kind of be able to craft the benchmark assets. And then most of the studios would work with some outsourcing companies somewhere like in the world, maybe like in Southeast Asia, maybe in East Europe, maybe somewhere else. And then they need people who know the pipeline really well and who can establish this communication between external and internal team. And so it's like a combo of two, where you're besides being a good artist, you're also a very good admin of other people's work, which is great. And that's a separate skill. It's, if you wish, it's a separate part of the brain is responsible for that. So you kind of like, it's a very specific type of personality that requires to have these kind of traits in order to obtain that position. So yeah, it's worth thinking about that, where eventually your path will lead to. I would encourage anyone who actually going into that journey to decide, how do you see yourself really? I know it sounds cheesy, but like this is a standard HR question on the interview. What do you think of where you're going to be in 10 years? Yeah, it's actually a valid question. What do you think you're going to be in 10, maybe in 20 years? Would you want to be like, for example, like Miyazaki, when you're 60 years old, 70 years old, and you're still drawing, sitting there on top? That gives you a lot of food for thought. Obviously some of these questions you can't answer right away, but it's good to have a thinking about that, which you can then re-estimate and re-evaluate later. I would say that disregarding the career development that you take, disregarding the position you're in, you still want to continuously learn. And the reason being for that is because, as I said before, in many cases, if you're having to do something with any sort of technical setup of your current processes, because the technology evolves so quickly, we now have this crazy AI systems, we have all the automated processes, we have PCG systems, we have all sorts of other tools, whistles and bells that constantly every day evolve and evolve. Possibly there will be new engines as well, and maybe something to do with alternative kind of input data devices and whatnot, which would require obviously a lot of learning and new skills and kind of like adaptivity of your knowledge and experience towards that new tech. So constant learning process is a must. And yeah, I can't see how under any circumstances we can say like, okay, this is done and dusted and we're going to use that tech for entirety of the career. So because literally every single aspect of art making process digitally during my tenure in the last, say, 15 years, for example, like literally everything changed, every single bit. There's that kind of like interesting example and theoretical knowledge about the country call. It's called like something's ship, and the ship is sailing in the sea, but then the crew of the ship constantly rebuilding the ship, and they take board by board and replacing it with new boards. And at a certain point, after the ship reaches the destination point, it's all brand new, like 3 times already changed, like since the its original version that departed from the original destination point. So it's same for you guys. You probably, where you're starting right now, in 10 years past or 10, 15 years, we won't be using the same tools anymore. You guys gonna reevaluate, readjust everything, probably even multiple times in a row. So yeah, something to in mind and prepare that there's no point at which you can chill down, rest, and say, okay, this is good. I'm good at this. This is now forever my tool. That's never happened. So yeah, you should also follow the studio breakdowns and GDC talks and reverse engineer workflows if you can. There's a lot of data online. It's just a fun watch if you go on the GDC channel. Just even like look at the old, very retro style games and people talking about how those are made. In principle, certain things will give you like a very good understanding how tricky and kind of like bounding and limiting things were back in the day due to a hardware of computers, and people had to come up with a very fancy plans on how to show on the screen much better picture than they actually ever could, but with the smoke and mirrors. So it's genuinely fun, and many of those stories are really interesting to listen to as like you know, it's a monument to people's ability to invent crazy methods of being you know, kind of effective and economic with their technical performance. So I highly advise. And not only that, there's many other topics obviously which you can find like very interesting things in. So yeah, I would say there are some things that worth to mention about collaboration and leadership, because as you grow, you know, your values will shift, obviously, your interests will shift, the amount of products you'll release with time will kind of like give you a completely different perspective on things, and will discover different angles of the view that you never thought of before. So it is quite important to stay in check and constantly be in conjunction with other people, and sanity check all your progresses, all your mind flow, if you wish. And relatively positive is just general practice to kind of like self-willingly put yourself into the critique line, because in the industry there is no such a thing like critique. It's critique is a mentorship. So every sort of criticism towards your work aims to make you better. I mean, probably there are some examples of when the critique is not very constructive, when people just criticize without any suggestion why things are bad or good, but it's still kind of like should evoke you to at least think about, oh yeah, maybe that person cannot like perfectly explain what they don't like about my art, you know, on a very sensory level, but you know, you can do that part of a job yourself as well, because they give you enough information to indicate like there's something off with this piece. I cannot really tell sometimes whether it's a color or a shape or a form or a material or something else, or maybe the mood, or maybe a storytelling, or maybe anything else in the, or maybe altogether even. But then this is the part of your mental exercise that you constantly have to continue doing with yourself and with the help of other people as well. So in that regard, collaboration is a very good process where you can cross interrogate each other, you know, in a friendly manner. It doesn't have to have any negative kind of like background to it, like, because, you know, I can understand that most of the people who work in art are quite sensitive, because they, if you wish, they pour their soul in their art. They self-express by large their own personality in that. And if their own personality that is expressed in the art gets a critique, then it feels like a personal attack on you. But it's very rarely the case, actually. So most of the time, I mean, I've been lucky so far to deal with most of the people who, you know, who've been very constructive in their criticism, and it's never been an issue. And I had like, maybe I had a certain predisposition to that made me always question, like, that's not about me. It's about something I've done here that I could do better. So it's a very useful tool to use to upgrade your skills all the time. And the leadership, besides the collaboration, is a next thing. So before you get into any sort of leadership role, you will be led by other people who have administrative right to correct your work. Obviously, you have to comply with that formally because it's the normal workflow in any company. However small the studio might be, and even if your department consists from 2 people and there's 1 senior guy, you kind of have to obey and listen to them to a certain extent. And but that doesn't decline that they have to give your feedback in a transparent way that is actionable, so you can, you know, exactly understand what is wrong and what needs to be done to make work better. But then there will be a breaking point after which you will become a leader to some other people, and you will have to explain. You'll have to do the same thing, but to other people as well. So, and you always have to keep thinking about these things because. Same as there's always going to be a more senior person in the studio. Even after you joined your first company and worked there for a year, 2 years, there are probably going to be in some time another junior who will work side by side with you, but who is like less experienced, less knowledgeable about the current processes, about the specifics of your project. So you will become naturally a lead to that person, even if you're not holding a title of a lead. So think about that, how constructively you can, you know, mentor them and teach them and make them understand things that you understood yourself or came to these conclusions with the help of other colleagues. It's very, I would say, it's a process that makes your brain constantly moving and acting. It's called neuroplasticity, right? You're thinking all the time from different angles about the same problem. So it keeps you fresh. It's really good. So yeah, but then also it would be unfair not to say about the common problematic issues in the industry that has to do with things like, for example, burnouts, imposter syndromes, you know, all sorts of other things, because you most likely will go through the stages at which you will think like that your art is not good enough, you know, you will have some problems with maybe other people as well, because there are very rarely but cases, you know, depending where you are, in which circumstances, in which cases and situations, there are some people in the studio, if not you, but others, who burn out after like crunching on the project for, you know, number of months, for example, before the release candidate. And naturally that fatigue comes with certain negative effects, obviously, that kind of spread widely in a team, and there might be conflicts. And, you know, you have to understand how to deal with these situations and how to protect yourself and protect other people in the workspace from these effects. And obviously, you know, briefly touching upon it, we can't like cover each example because it would be very specific to an individual and their circumstances. But generally speaking, you have to know how to do a few things in your life, how to balance productivity with recovery, because burnouts mostly happen when people are working in a boost mode, when things aren't like stitched together well enough to be smooth in the very end of a development cycle. And everyone has to work long hours, and everyone has to sacrifice their, you know, their spare time, and you know, spend like an extra day in work, or even like the whole week in a row. Especially for those who are working in the US. For you guys, I'm not envious, because it's notorious how people crunching there, like in the bigger studios. You know, you've read all the stories in Kotaku Journal and other places where the massive projects are being like held behind the release date because it was like hell of a bugged, or like content wouldn't be ready, or other things, and people would have to crunch a lot. So these burnouts born from these kind of occasions. And as far as I'm concerned, the reasons that are leading to those things cannot be fully eradicated just due to nature of humans, right? Like, and some of the issues of those things that we've mentioned before already, collaboration, you know, like the ever-changing pipeline, ever-evolving technology that raises the need to change things retrospectively. Okay, we've transitioned from one version of the engine to another. Let's remake all our assets, but we only have like a few months time for it before the release. Go, artists, all go. You know, that's what may lead to that. And whilst it's not anyone's specific intent, but this thing happens naturally. So something I've mentioned as well, imposter syndrome. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like don't know like how many of you guys will end up being in a high senior leadership position, but you know, I've met most of the people with whom we actually had time to discuss that topic. Most of the people who obtain like a lead level position, director tier position or higher, then these people, you know, when they first go to work in that role, obviously they come from all walks of life. No one was born to be like a director of some kind of whichever department with that pre-established knowledge. It's something that they've gained it through work experience, as a path, as a learning curve that lasts for years and sometimes for even decades now. So and every person stepping into the new role will have that feeling if they're, you know, if they are realizing and adequately judging their skill set. They just understand that they simply cannot be well prepared or equipped for that position. There's going to be gaps in your knowledge for sure. And even if you're going like from mid to senior and you're suddenly given a responsibility to do like a full set of characters, for example, in 3D or 2D, or do like a full level, vastly expansive map of the environment in one of the biggest like open world games like GTA 5, for example, or whatever other game, it's a huge responsibility. And clearly you will not be prepared by the day when you're given that responsibility. So, but let it not scare you, because, you know, everyone around you are working as a safe net that helps you to kind of hold in place and borrow knowledge and skill set from other people to embed it in your process, and do a lot of consultation, round 360 feedback, all sorts of kind of like play tests to make sure that the work you're outputting is up to a standard and it works well and it works in conjunction with other departments. So once again, it's about collaboration. And you know, any of these like bad feelings can be over, you know, can be sort of resolved, I would say, if you have a strong backbone of your team holding you know, together with you and helping you kind of in your daily routine. So how we're doing in time? Okay, we're nearly there. What I would say else on top of everything that we've mentioned, I would say, yeah, like maybe a couple of advices as a closing thoughts, and maybe after that we can go to QA if you guys have any sort of specific questions to anything I say, or maybe, you know, slight tangent, whatever you guys wish to discuss, I'm more than happy to. So amongst the advices, obviously I want to, knowing that there's like a completely different split of people amongst you, I don't want to be like overly specific to any sort of discipline, but I would say once again, can't like emphasize it enough. Guys, learn fundamentals deeply. Like, this is really what matters. And, you know, amongst those, obviously, I've mentioned, you know, general understanding of composition, you know, like how lighting works. For those of you who do with the character-oriented or character-related art, it's obviously anatomy, because from that point of origin, you can divert into any or deviate into any sort of creature-esque, creepy, ugly monsters, or you can go into, you know, like cute, nice, bubbly, like stylized, whatever. But there is a core fundamentals that, you know, kind of like shoots all these offsprings everywhere, but from the common root. So you want to make sure you know those things, you know, rules of perspective. Obviously, it's subjective to your specific discipline, but I would say that those things, they carry on through your career. And I would say, you know, despite the tool that you use, once again, you can be given like any sort of tool to work with. But if you have this deep knowledge of how to pick the right color, how to translate the shape or build up a form, how to turn it into a language that can be replicated and scaled up in mass and translated to other people, those things will bend your life in a very positive way. Because if to go a bit broader than the job-oriented and work-related topic, I would say every one of you who are picking the art as a profession will end up changing your chemistry of your brain on a physical level. So you will become, like, let's call it, professionally deformed human being. And no longer you will be playing games. I mean, it's probably a sad part of it, but every time you'll play games, you're not going to be like enjoying purely things as you were a kid, if you will, but you will start digesting. You will have analytical brain. You will start thinking about how everything is crafted together, how everything is put together, what were the choices. You will start finding things as a developer. You know, when I play a game, I'm not longer like enjoying it as much as I was playing it when I was, 10 years old. And I'm going to some door that has a handle, and I'm looking around to see like how it's flat, like flush with the surface, actually, because there's not real handle. It's just like a texture on the flat plane and things like that, So and it's inevitable. But there's a good part of it. Like, you can extrapolate a lot of these knowledges and fundamental skills into many different aspects of your life. Whether you're, I don't know, picking a present for your friend, or you're buying a dress for your girlfriend, or for pants for your boyfriend, you know how to pick and choose things. You know how to do this, that. You can go into production design. You can do automotive. You can do many other jobs that are associated with this general knowledge of art. And that is why I would say that these fundamentals are great to understand, and you can never underinvest in them. But also be patient. Mastery comes from mileage, not the shortcuts. There is no really like a quick button to kind of make a beautiful render in Blender. There's no kind of like easy way to, it's just bamboozling type of thing. I would even say, if you haven't suffered through your career as you obtain skills and getting better at those skills, you probably have not gone through it, right? Like, it haven't happened. You have to, it will be painful, and it must be. And if it is not, then you're doing something wrong, essentially, because the pleasure of obtaining a highest level of mastery of something and unlocking a new skill only is comparable to that ever constant suffering process, when you kind of learning it and studying every day. Do your dailies, do your studies all the time. Have a sketchbook with you in your pocket next to your heart. Every time you go to the tube station or underground metro, like, you can take it out and make a charge or a like quick sketch of the man sitting in front of you. That's good enough. You're constantly developing, learn new things, and knowing more about how to apply these new tips, tricks, and things you learn through your life into your craft and into your art. So yeah, stay curious and stay generous. Give feedback and receive feedback. Share what you learn with other people. It pays back in like plenty of unexpected ways. So yeah, I think we'll round up here. And I see already quite a few questions in the chat. So guys, thank you very much for listening. Let's see what questions we have.